In this activity, we're going to start where we left off at the end of the last activity and learn some more HTML elements that we can add to our document. We will continue to learn learning.html, and there are 2 more HTML files to download that we'll be working with at the very end. So to begin with, we want to start working with a list. So uncomment your list code. And go ahead and let's look at what this looks like in the browser. So if we scroll down and find that list, I have the wrong one open. This is a big deal to be able to make sure that you have the right file open. If you make a change and you don't see it, then you might in fact be looking at one document and editing another, and that's what I was doing. I had an earlier version open, and now I'm looking at the one that I'm working on. So that's a really big thing to check. So there it is. There's the list. That doesn't look like a list at all, right? So what I want to do is I want to get rid of that list note, and I'm going to add the list tags. And in HTML, UL is one of the lists. And I want this, and it stands for unordered list. And I want to put the opening one at the beginning of the list, and then the closing one at the end. And I'm going to indent I simply highlight what I want and push tab. I'm going to indent just a little bit there to whatever's contained in this UL, so it's done. Now each item, so this is the entire list, but a list is made up of multiple items, and you need to code each item individually. So I'm going to type LI, stands for list item, and it looks like this. And it has opening and closing tag, and I surround each list item with opening and closing LI tags. Now I can do this pretty quickly simply by adding LI tags, right? And copying. So that copy paste works really good when you're doing multiple things like this. Oops. All right, there. So now we have got that list completely structured, and notice that all the content is inside the LI tags. There's no content outside LI tags in a list. So make sure everything is inside an LI tag. Then we refresh it here, and that's what we get. We get a bulleted list. And notice that it adds the bullets automatically for you. It puts them on individual lines. Remember, before they were spread across the page. But it puts them on individual lines and puts a bullet in front of them. There is a second type of list, and that's an OL, an ordered list, and you change both the beginning and ending tag to OL. The LIs stay exactly the same. And when I do that, I get numbers. All right, notice again, it keeps them on individual lines and it adds numbering for us. We can adjust both the bullets and the numbering once we get to CSS. All right, let's move on to the table. And here I'm going to take off the comments for the table. And let's look what it looks like in the web page. All right, so there's the table. This is a heading and a paragraph, and then this is the table right here, and it's just all, again, put together in one section. So we're going to get rid of the note, and we're going to add the HTML table tag. Now notice that this one has opening and closing tags, and we're going to put the opening table tag at the very beginning of the entire table and the closing at the bottom. So the table tag surrounds everything in the file. We add that, and look, we don't get anything out of that. Got rid of that note, right? But notice we don't get anything out of that. There's several tags that are required in the table attribute. So we need to do all of them before we start seeing things happen correctly. Again, I'm going to indent one tab. By the way, it's best to use spaces. I've set you can set the preferences in your editor for tabs to be spaces, and I've set my editor for each tab to be 2 spaces. This first thing is is to go at the top of the table, but not be one of the elements in the table. And this is called a caption. And there's a specific tag for captions for tables. And it just says caption. That's the name of the tag, and I'm going to add an opening and closing caption tag around that very first part. And then what we get are table rows. Tables are made up of rows and columns, and the primary element in the tag is the table row. Now, this first row these are the column headings: technique, description, and utility. Those are the things that are in this. So every row, if you notice down here, first has a technique, then a description, and some of the descriptions are long, so they might be on multiple lines, and a utility rating. And then the next one will be a technique, a description, and a utility rating. All right, so the first row is those headings that go across there. So I'm going to identify each individual row and go all the way through the table and make sure that it begins right before. And now notice that I'm ending a row and beginning one. So if I want to, I can just copy. Again, copy paste works really well. You have to be careful to get everything in the right place. So make sure you're ending the row at the right place and beginning it, right? It ends with that utility rating. It begins with the actual learning technique. So I'll go ahead and let you work on that on your own. All right, now we've added all the rows, added that final row, closing row tag right before the closing table. And let's go ahead and refresh in the browser and see what we get here. Okay, so still it's not looking like a table. There's still a lot of things that are all together, and we're not getting separation here. So now what we have to do is to establish the columns inside the row, we need to identify each thing as a table heading or a table data. So at the very top one, I'm going to use these as table headings. So there's a table heading. One is the technique. And then description and utility. So I'm going to have 3 columns in this first row. And 3 columns in there. And these are going to be table headings. And I can go over and look at what this looks like now. And notice we're not finished, so they're showing up at the bottom. We're just kind of doing it halfway. This won't come together in a nice way until we're all the way done. So now we need to do, the next row is not going to be headers. I'm just going to have the headers at the top of the column. So just the very first row is headers. The rest of these are table data. And the tag for table data is TD. And it also has opening and closing tags. And each of these rows is going to have 3 table data. Right? So notice that the description is often longer than 1 line. So make sure that you just surround it with 1 TD. No matter how many lines long it is, it should have an opening and a closing TD around it. And then the technique is all on a single line, and the utility rating is all on a single line. So go ahead and add table data to all of these, right? And this takes a while. Notice that there's a lot of tags needed in the table. It helps to be patient and careful so that you get them all in the right space. Now that one's clear down there. All right, so you want to make sure they're in the right space and you get all of them. Go ahead and pause the video and finish this. All right, once you've added all of the opening and closing TD tags, remember which ones we've added. Table around everything, caption around any kind of heading that you might have or label that you want on the table, and then add all of the row elements, TRs, TH is where you want headings, and TD is where you want table data. Now we can go look at the web page and see if it makes a difference. And there we have, now everything's lined up nice. Notice there's the caption across the top, and it's centered, so as we make this smaller and bigger, that caption stays centered. Then the table headers, notice that they are bolded and centered across the column. And table data is regular font, and the size of each column is just big enough to hold the content. So if I could open up this all the way, then the column, everything would be on one line. But I've got some wrapping going on just because of the size of the browser window isn't as big as the data in the table. So also notice a couple of things. We don't get a border around the table automatically. That's something that we'll add with CSS. We don't get very good spacing between columns. Again, those things will, all that style we will add with CSS. The next thing that we're going to learn how to do is a graphic link. So far we've already done links. So here we have one up here. We have 3 of them in this paragraph. All of these are text links, and what that means is the content is text. And so the words show up on the page and you click on the words and you go somewhere. And that's a text link because you're activating the link by clicking on text. Well, it's also possible to click on an image and have it take you somewhere. So the image itself can be a link. Well, we have a few images. Let's go ahead and make one a link, an image link. So we're going to start here with this one, the interleaved practice, and we're going to make it a link. The way that we do that, remember that we have an opening A tag and a closing A tag, and we need an href. In here, between the opening and closing A tag is where the content goes. And up until now, we have put text in here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to say, oh no, we don't want text click on, we want an image. So we take the entire image tag, right? Remember, it's a single tag, but it's long because it contains all of this. And I'm going to move that. I'm going to say what I want for my content for my link. So it's going to go between the opening and the closing A tag. I'm going to put that entire image in there. And that's what I've got there. Now what we have left to do is add an href. And I want this to link to an article on interleaved practice. It's actually a pretty long URL. So I've put, whenever I use URLs in a learning activity, I try to put them in the activity itself. So you should be able to go to the link section of the activity and copy that URL. So I'm just going to copy it directly from there and paste it in this href between those quotes. And there I have that. Now notice this is really long. So I can I'm going to break it right here at the image tag just so it's quite so long. And there I've got the total. So now I have an A link with an image between it. I'm going to save that. Now I go look in the browser and see what that looks like. And what happens? The image looks exactly the same, but watch, my cursor goes from an arrow to a hand. And so I can tell that that's been turned into a link. Then I click on it and it opens up that page. So there I have created a graphic link. Okay, I want you to do one more. So there is one more link for the distributed practice. So in your code, find the image that goes with distributed practice and make it a graphic link. Okay, once you've added the code to make that a graphic link, go back and check and make sure it actually links to the page it expected. So this distributed practice, right, which is the link that we retrieved from the learning activity on Canvas. Now notice again, because this was so long, I put an enter there to get my image below. But even though this is really long, the URL, you don't ever want to put a carriage return inside quotes. So I'm not going to break a line in here. If I make my editor smaller, it will wrap that, but notice that it's not a new line. In fact, you can see that line 62 covers 2 lines. What that is that's just word wrapping. And that's okay, because I'm not putting in a hard return. So I'm leaving those long. It's actually good practice to keep your lines short, 80 columns or less. But there's occasions when, especially with URLs, when they're just way too long to be able to fit on one line in less than 80 characters, so you leave them a little bit longer. All right, that's how graphic links work. So now we have both graphic links. Oops, I'm going to go back to. So we have both graphic links and text links on our web page. Now, one thing that is really common is to have what's called a website. A website is a group of web pages that go together. And when you have a website of multiple pages, it's very often that you have navigation that links you from one page to another throughout the website. We want to learn how to do that kind of navigation. I'm going to go ahead and add the navigation at the top of the body just under that main heading. So if you can find that spot in the main heading, we're going to add navigation. Now, I had you download these other files, distractions.html and procrastination.html, and those are going to be our navigation. I mean, they're going to be our website. Sorry, those 3 pages are going to make up our website. So in our navigation, we want to have words for each one of those. So this one is about learning techniques. So I'm going to use the word learning techniques for that. The other one is managing procrastination. And the other one is handling distractions. So add these words at the top, just under that main heading. Now the way that navigation is most commonly done is as an unordered list. So we know how to do an unordered list. So go ahead and turn this into a list, right? With opening and closing UL and adding the LI tags. So you can pause the video and do that. Well, once we've made this a list, it will show up in the browser as an unordered list. So, but notice they're not links. So now we want to make each of these a link, but specifically we want it to be a local link. Because all of these files are together, we can use, they're in the same website, we're keeping them on the same, we will keep them all on the same server. Right now they're just local. But once we upload them, we'll upload them to the same server. So we don't need that entire URL. We don't need to say http:// go to this host, look up for the file. We don't need all of those instructions, and we don't want to spend the time going out and finding that. What we want to do is a local link. So each of these, we want them to be a link. Right, so we want an opening and closing A tag to make those links. And notice that the opening and both the opening and closing A tag need to be inside the LI. But now what we want to do, remember href is required, but what we want to do is use a local link. So we're going to use a relative address, just like we did with the image tags. So we just said, from where you are, look for this file. So we are currently in learning.html, and we can just say, well, from where you are, look for learning.html. This one is going to reference itself. And there's both sides of the coin. There are people who think that this should be an inactive link if it's linking to the current page, and other people think that it should stay active for consistency. So whichever you prefer, but I will be making these all active links, even the one that is linking to itself. All right, so here we want this to be again, opening a tag, closing a tag, and then we want the href here. And where do we want to go? From where you are, look for the HTML file on procrastination. So right there it is. It doesn't have to go anywhere, so that file name is just enough. Now, notice how the editor is helping me spell it. Procrastination.html. All right, one left. So you go ahead and pause the video and do that last link. One thing I noticed when the editor helped me spell it, it used a capital letter. I need to be careful of that because you want to be able to match, you want to match your files exactly. And notice they are all lowercase. Matching the case, whether it's lowercase or uppercase, is really critical when you go to a server. If you're on a Windows or a Mac machine, both of those are case insensitive as far as the file names go. But once you go to a server, if it's a Linux server, which many are, in fact, the most of servers are, Linux is case sensitive on the file names. So if you have a capital there, it won't find it. So if you ended up with capitals there, be sure and change them to lowercase. All right, so now I save that and refresh, and now notice how they've turned into links. So there, I click on it and it goes. I use the back arrow. Okay, let's go look in the browser what that looks like. I refresh it and notice how now they look like links, right? And so now I can click on them and it takes me to that other page. Okay, so we go look at them on the web page, refresh our browser, and here we have links. And when we click on them, it takes us to that other page. I can do the back arrow, click the other one, do the back arrow. Now when I click on the link that is for itself, it just reloads that current page. And there we have a navigation list. Notice that this does not look like navigation. The entire web page doesn't look like what we expect from a web page because it doesn't have style, and it doesn't have the color and the spacing and the organization that we will get from CSS. So we'll change that navigation list to look more like a navigation bar once we get into CSS. We won't worry now that these are not looking like web pages. Well, what we want to do, a website, the navigation is the same on most of the pages in the website. Sometimes the initial page, the navigation will be slightly different. So we don't only want the navigation on this one page, we actually want navigation on all the pages. So to do that, I'm going to have to open up all the pages, both these other HTML files. So I'm going to open them, and what I want to do is I want to put the navigation just under their main headings. And this is pretty straightforward. I just simply have to capture that UL and copy and paste it right there. So there it is right after that main heading. Here it is right after that main heading. I need to save both these files. And then when I go over here, I can try it again. I do that, and now notice that that navigation is right there. Well, I should be able to click on this and go to the other page. and click on this and go back to Learning Technique. So notice that the navigation is showing up on all the pages, and I can test each one to make sure that they're going exactly where I expect them to go. All right, that's it for the activity today. Make sure you complete everything, so this will be a final and complete web page. One last thing you'll want to do is validate it. So here I've got the validator open. Remember how to validate, choose the file and check it.